The night my mother destroyed my entire life, she did it with a smile. "We only kept you for the tax benefits," Lorraine said across the table. It was my 25th birthday. Friday night. The busiest restaurant in our small town. People talking, glasses clinking, country music humming softly overhead. 6 words. That was all it took to shatter 25 years of memories. But Lorraine didn't know something. For 8 months, I had been preparing for that exact moment. And the 3 people sitting quietly at a table near the window weren't strangers. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. Instead, I reached into my bag and wrapped my fingers around the envelope I'd brought with me. The moment I pulled it out, everything in that restaurant was about to change. But to understand why, you have to go back 8 months. 8 months earlier, I was in my parents' basement on a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by dust and cardboard boxes. Lorraine had left a sticky note on my apartment door that week. Basement. Saturday. Don't forget. She wanted space cleared for my cousin Brittany, who was moving back to town after a breakup. Lorraine didn't ask. She never asked. She assigned. So there I was dragging boxes across cold concrete. Most of it was junk. Old Christmas lights, fishing gear that belonged to Glenn, stacks of forgotten decorations. Then I found a box tucked behind the water heater. Lorraine's name was written across the top in faded marker. I knew I shouldn't open it. I opened it anyway. Inside was a manila folder. Inside that folder, my entire life rearranged itself. An official adoption certificate. A birth certificate I had never seen before. The original one. At the center, typed neatly in black ink. Baby girl Dunbar. Beneath it sat a receipt from a tax consultant. A single line highlighted in yellow. Adoption tax credit, $5,400. I sat on the basement floor for nearly 40 minutes. Not crying, just thinking. Every memory I had began shifting into a new shape. Every time Lorraine told me how lucky I was. Every story she told neighbors about her selfless decision. Every moment Glenn avoided my questions about baby pictures. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Claire. She answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "I need you to meet me," I said. "Paige, you sound. Behind the clinic. Parking lot. Please." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in her car outside Dr. Weller's veterinary clinic, the dome light glowing overhead. Claire read the birth certificate once. Then again. "Dunbar," she said quietly. "You've never heard that name?"
No.
She looked at me carefully. "Remember the DNA kit I gave you for Christmas?" I did. It was still sealed in my bathroom drawer. I had laughed it off back then. I already knew who I was. That version of me felt like a stranger now. "Use it," Claire said. So that night I did.
Cheek swab.
Registration code. Sealed envelope. At 11 p.m., I dropped into the mailbox outside the post office. 6 weeks for results. 6 weeks pretending nothing had changed. During those 6 weeks, I watched Lorraine differently. Noticing things I had always ignored. The way she reminded me of everything we've done for you. The pride in her voice whenever she told the adoption story. Not pain.
Pride.
Glenn always went quiet during those conversations, suddenly fascinated by his shoes. I kept paying my $400 rent for the converted garage apartment behind their house. I kept showing up for Sunday dinner. I kept saying, "Thanks, Mom," when she passed the potatoes. Claire asked me once over coffee how I was holding up. "I'm waiting," I told her. For what? For proof. But there was something else I wasn't admitting yet. I was waiting to understand why my birth certificate had been filed beside a tax receipt. The email arrived on a Tuesday during my lunch break. I was sitting in my car eating a granola bar when the notification appeared. Close family match found. My heart stopped. I opened it. The page loaded slowly, the way everything loads slowly in small towns with terrible signal. Then I saw it. Helen Dunbar. Age 47. Location, Ridgemont. Match confidence, 99.7%. Relationship, parent. Her profile photo showed a tired woman with short brown hair standing in a garden. She wore medical scrubs. A nurse. Married to Tom Dunbar. Age 49. One son.
Cody. 20.
I had a brother. The granola bar stayed untouched in the passenger seat. I tried writing an email 7 different times. The first 6 were too long, too emotional, too careful. The 7th had only 3 lines. My name is Paige. I believe you may be my biological mother. I'm not angry. I just want to know. I hit send before I could change my mind. 4 hours later, my phone buzzed. 1 sentence. I've been waiting for this email for 25 years. I read it 3 times. Then I pressed the phone against my chest and sat in the parking lot until the sun disappeared behind the trees. For 25 years, I believed Lorraine and Glenn were the only family I had. Now a woman 2.5 hours away was telling me she had spent 25 years waiting for me. Lorraine didn't know any of it. Not yet. For 3 months, I lived in 2 separate worlds. On my days off, I drove to Ridgemont. The first time I arrived, Helen's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the lasagna she'd made. Tom shook my hand at the door and said, "Welcome home, kid," like he'd practiced it all day. Cody grinned when he saw me. "You've got Mom's chin," he said. "Sorry about that." Later, Helen opened a small jewelry box on the kitchen counter. Inside was a tiny hospital wristband. Baby girl Dunbar. "I lit a candle every March 15th, she whispered. "Every year." Meanwhile, life back home continued exactly the same. Except one thing changed. 3 weeks before my birthday, Lorraine invited me to dinner. "Friday night," she said sweetly. "Maggie's place. Just the 3 of us." 2 weeks later, I found a typed notice on my kitchen table. Rent for my garage apartment was increasing from $400 to $850. 30 days to accept it. Or leave. I did the math. Between rent and losing the family health insurance soon, I'd be paying over $1,200 a month. Impossible on a veterinary technician's salary. When I asked Glenn about it, he stirred his coffee 3 times and said quietly, "Your mother has her reasons." That was when I knew. Lorraine was preparing to cut me loose. What she didn't realize was that I had already started preparing too. I researched insurance, apartments, job transfers to Ridgemont. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. For days before my birthday, Lorraine knocked on my apartment door with that sugary smile she used at church events. "Dinner Friday," she reminded me. "We have something important to discuss." After she left, I picked up my phone and called Helen. "Friday night," I told her. "Maggie's place." "What do you need from us?" she asked.
Come, I said.
"But sit at another table. Don't come over unless I signal. We'll be there." And that brings us back to the restaurant. Back to the moment Lorraine looked across the table at me, smiling sweetly. "We only kept you for the tax benefits." She had no idea the truth was already sitting 3 tables behind her. And in my bag, the envelope that was about to change everything. "You don't even know her." Lorraine's voice cuts across the table, sharp with irritation. I don't answer. Instead, I reach into my bag and slowly pull out the envelope I've been carrying for months. I place it on the table between us, beside the unsigned paper and the pen Lorraine brought. A plain white envelope. The corner slightly bent from living in my bag for 8 months. Lorraine stares at it. "What is that?" I say nothing. Glenn leans forward, squinting at it like it might explain everything. 2 tables away, Pastor Jim has stopped pretending not to listen. My fingertips rest lightly on the envelope while I wait. Because what's inside it is about to dismantle every story Lorraine Mercer has ever told about herself. And I want her to feel it coming before it lands. Lorraine hates silence. "Answer me, Paige," she snaps. "What's in that envelope?" Still, I wait. And right on cue, Lorraine makes the mistake I knew she would. "When your real mother threw you away like yesterday's trash, at least we took you in," she says loudly. "At least we gave you something." The table beside us goes quiet. A fork hits a plate. Pastor Jim turns fully in his chair. Maggie behind the counter lowers the coffee pot slowly. Glenn reaches toward Lorraine. "Maybe we should." "No," she cuts him off. "She needs to hear this." Lorraine leans forward, her voice carrying across the restaurant. "Nobody else wanted you, Paige. Nobody." Heat rises in my chest, not shame, something sharper. Because I know the truth. I've sat at Helen Dunbar's kitchen table. I've read the letter she wrote about the night she gave birth alone at 22. I know the story Lorraine is twisting into something ugly, and I won't let it stand. In the far corner of the restaurant, Helen has heard every word. Tom's hand rests gently on her shoulder. Cody's jaw is tight. I look back at Lorraine. Are you done? I ask quietly. She straightens in her chair. Yes. Good. I open the envelope. The first thing I place on the table is Helen's letter. The second is a printed DNA report. 99.7% match. The third is a photograph taken a month ago. Me standing between a woman and a man. All three of us squinting into the sun and smiling the kind of smiles you don't have to fake. I slide the photo across the table toward Lorraine. Funny you should mention my real mother, I say calmly, because I found her 8 months ago. Lorraine goes completely still, not shocked. Frozen. Glenn pushes his chair back slightly, the legs scraping the floor. Her name is Helen Dunbar. I continue. She's a community health nurse in Ridgemont. And she's been waiting 25 years to find me. My voice stays steady. She didn't throw me away. She was 22 and alone, and her family forced her into a decision she barely understood. Lorraine stares down at the photograph. She sees me standing between two strangers, looking happier than she's ever seen me. You can't, she stammers. And one more thing, I say. I pause. They're here tonight. Lorraine's head snaps up. Her eyes scan the restaurant, searching. And across the room, Helen Dunbar sets her napkin on the table and waits. I turn slightly and nod. Helen stands first. Then Tom. Then Cody. They walk across Maggie's place quietly, not rushing, not making a scene. Just walking toward me. Toward the daughter Helen lost 25 years ago. The restaurant falls silent as they approach. Helen reaches the table and stops beside me. She doesn't say anything. She simply places her hand on my shoulder.
Warm. Steady.
The gesture of someone who has waited decades for the chance to do exactly that. Tom stands behind her, solid and calm. Cody moves to her other side, hands shoved into his pockets. I look at Lorraine. Lorraine. Glenn. I say evenly. This is Helen. I take a breath. My mother. The word drops into the room like a stone into water. Lorraine shoots to her feet, so quickly her chair hits the table. Wine spills across the paperwork she brought. Your daughter, she shrieks. I raised her for 25 years. And you just told her she was useless, Helen replies quietly. The sentence travels across the restaurant. Maggie covers her mouth. Pastor Jim watches, silently. Lorraine spins toward Glenn. Say something. Glenn stares at the table. His hands are flat against the wood. He says nothing. You planned this, Lorraine snaps at me. You set this up to humiliate me. No, I reply. I planned this, so I wouldn't be alone when you did what you did. Lorraine looks around the room, searching for support. Karen from the post office is staring at her, stunned. I was a tax write-off too, I add. Glenn's face sinks like a wall finally giving way. Tom steps forward then, resting a hand on the back of my chair. We're not here for a fight, he says calmly. We're here for Paige. The comparison between the two men is impossible to ignore. One drove 2.5 hours to stand beside a daughter he barely knows. The other couldn't defend the one he raised. Glenn slowly stands and grabs his jacket. I think we should go, Lorraine. I'm not leaving until she apologizes. Lorraine shouts. I have nothing to apologize for, I say. Glenn walks toward the door without waiting for her. For the first time in decades, he leaves her standing alone. Lorraine turns desperately toward Pastor Jim. Jim, you know me. Tell them what kind of mother I've been. The restaurant holds its breath. Pastor Jim studies her quietly. I think this is something you need to discuss with God and with your daughter, he says gently. Lorraine's face crumples, not in sadness, but in the realization that the story she has told for 25 years just collapsed in front of everyone. She grabs her purse and storms out. Glenn pauses at the door. For a moment it looks like he might say something to me. He doesn't. He simply nods once and follows her out. The door closes behind them. The restaurant exhales. Helen slowly sits in Lorraine's empty chair. Tom and Cody pull up beside us. For a moment, none of us speak. Then Helen squeezes my hand. "I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner," she whispers. "You're here now," I say. Cody picks up a menu and glances at us. "So, can we order?" he says. I drove 2.5 hours and I'm starving. The laugh that escapes me is sudden and messy and real. Soon food arrives. Conversation slowly replaces the silence. Helen tells me about the night I was born and the candles she lit every March 15th for 25 years. Tom asks about my job at the clinic and actually listens to the answers. Cody shows me ridiculous memes and calls me hopeless when I don't understand them. For the first time in my life, dinner feels normal. Near the end of the meal, Helen places a small box in front of me. "I've kept this for 25 years, she says softly. Inside is a tiny pink hospital wristband. Baby girl Dunbar. She's threaded it onto a silver chain. I fasten it around my wrist. It weighs almost nothing, but it feels heavier than anything I've ever worn. For 25 years, I believed I owed gratitude to the wrong people. Tonight, I'm sitting with the ones who never stopped wanting me. If you've ever had someone hold your basic needs over your head, housing, insurance, documents, and call it love, then you know exactly what that feels like. Here's something I thought about afterward. Why did Lorraine choose a crowded restaurant to do what she did? Was it meant to keep me quiet, or to make sure she stayed in control? Either way, the next morning was the last time I woke up in the garage apartment behind her house. The ceiling was the same water-stained drywall I'd stared at for years. The small windows still faced Lorraine's carefully arranged herb garden, the one she planted for the neighbors to admire, not for anyone to actually use. Everything in that room was familiar. None of it was really mine. I packed my life into 4 cardboard boxes.
Clothes, books,
My veterinary certifications. The photo of Helen and Tom from our first day together. A mug Claire gave me that says I'd rather be covered in dog hair. 7 years in that apartment, and everything I owned fit into the back seat of a Honda Civic. Claire showed up at 8 that morning. She didn't ask questions. She just started carrying boxes. By 9, I was on the phone with the insurance marketplace. Change of address. Qualifying life event. New plans starting in 60 days. I wrote the confirmation number on the back of a gas station receipt and folded it into my wallet. At 9:30, I walked across the yard to the main house. The lights were off. Lorraine's car sat in the driveway, but the curtains were drawn. She was inside. I knew it, but neither of us needed to see the other again. I left the apartment key on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I placed the move-out paper she'd given me to sign. My signature sat neatly at the bottom, and beneath it I'd written one extra line. "You don't need 30 days. I'm done today." No speech.
no argument.
No final scene. Claire and I pulled out of the driveway at 10. For the first few miles, I didn't look back. Then the GPS voice announced, "You are now entering Ridgemont." And something inside me finally broke loose, because it sounded like the first true direction my life had been given in years. A week later, I sat in a legal aid office in Ridgemont across from a lawyer named Sandra. She had a desk covered in family photos and a handshake strong enough to crack walnuts. I told her everything. She listened quietly. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "First thing," she said, "there is no legal process anywhere in this country to disown an adult child." I blinked. Your father was bluffing. Maybe he spoke to a lawyer, maybe he didn't. But there's no paperwork he can file, no judge who would hear it. The adoption was finalized 25 years ago. Legally, that's the end of it. Something in my chest loosened right then. A knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since Glenn mentioned consulting a lawyer. 3 weeks later, another envelope arrived. This one from the county clerk. Inside were my original birth records and the full adoption file. And in those pages was something Helen never knew. She hadn't voluntarily given me up. Her parents had signed the paperwork on her behalf. She was 22, overwhelmed, and no one had explained her rights. No attorney represented her. She'd been pushed into a decision she barely understood. I didn't show her that page yet. Some truths need the right moment. That night, I sent Glenn one message. There's no such thing as legally disowning an adult child. The lawyer confirmed it. I hope someday you ask yourself why you went along with everything. He read it. He never replied. Life slowly settled into something new. I moved into the Dunbar house for a while, paying rent Helen insisted she didn't need. I left the checks on the counter anyway until Tom quietly slipped them into the household jar. The clinic in Ridgemont hired me within a month. It was smaller than the old one, just Dr. Patel and me, and every morning the waiting room smelled like wet golden retriever. It was perfect. Cody and I started movie nights on Saturdays. He always picked horror films. I always argued for literally anything else. We compromised on action movies and debated pizza toppings like it was a matter of national security. Helen taught me her lasagna recipe one afternoon. Halfway through, she stopped and stared at my hands. "You roll your sleeves the same way I do," she said softly. I looked down. She was right. 25 years apart, and somehow we'd learned the same small habit. Sometimes in the evenings, Tom and I would sit on the back porch, looking out toward the tree line. He'd bring 2 mugs of coffee and say nothing, and that silence felt peaceful. That's what real family sounds like sometimes. Nothing at all. Back in my old town, the stories spread the way stories do in small places, quietly from living room to church pew to grocery aisle. People heard what happened at Maggie's. Lorraine stopped showing up to church. A Facebook post she wrote about hard parenting decisions disappeared within hours after the comments started asking questions. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of it. Mostly I felt distant, like watching a house collapse that had never been built on solid ground. About a month later, Glenn called. "I didn't want it to go like that," he said quietly. "How did you want it to go?" I asked. Silence. Finally, he admitted the truth in pieces. They had been broke when they adopted me. The tax credits helped. Then Lorraine got used to the arrangement. The arrangement. That's what he called raising me. "I'm not angry," I told him eventually. And it surprised me to realize I meant it. I'm just done. Now, a year later, I'm 26. My birthday dinner looks completely different. Helen made lasagna. Tom grilled steaks. Cody bought a crooked birthday cake that said, "Happy birthday, sis." Claire drove 2.5 hours just to be there. When Helen brought out the candles, her voice caught. "This is the first time I get to do this in person." I closed my eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to make a wish. Everything I needed was already sitting at the table. I have my own apartment now, 2nd floor, small window facing the trees. I pay every bill myself. Insurance, rent, everything. No one's tax benefit. No one's arrangement. Just Paige. On my wrist is the hospital bracelet Helen saved for 25 years, threaded on a silver chain. Not a reminder of what I lost. A reminder of what I found. I don't hate Lorraine. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend on the people who actually want me around. Helen and I are still learning each other. Tom taught me how to change a tire last month. Cody still sends me memes I barely understand. But we're here. And that's what real families are. Not perfect. Present. So if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's simple. If someone holds your basic needs hostage, your home, your security, your identity, and calls it love, that isn't love. That's leverage. And you don't owe gratitude for leverage. Tonight, on my kitchen windowsill, a candle burns. For 25 years, Helen lit one every March 15th, hoping somewhere her daughter was safe. Now I light it too. Not for loss. For the beginning of something new. For the first year of a life no one else controls. The flame flickers once, then steadies.
So do I.